Brother's new wife. Had no idea I owned the house they lived in. She called the police, but when? My younger brother Mark always had a way of getting what he wanted. Growing up, if he set his eyes on something, whether it was the last cookie in the jar or my parents' attention, he would find a way to claim it. But I never expected him to bring home a wife who would treat me like an intruder in the house our parents left me in their will. A house that, legally speaking, was entirely mine. I stood frozen in the doorway, keys still in hand, as Vanessa, my brother's wife of just 3 months, glared at me with such intense hatred that I felt a chill run down my spine. "You can't just walk in here whenever you want," she hissed, blocking my entry to what had been my childhood home, the inheritance my parents had specifically left to me after their tragic car accident last year. The very same home I had generously allowed Mark to live in rent-free while he got back on his feet after his business failed. "Actually, Vanessa, I can. This is my house," I replied, trying to keep my voice level despite the betrayal I felt building inside me. I had come by to drop off some paperwork for property taxes, paperwork that confirmed my ownership, but clearly Mark hadn't been honest with his new wife about our arrangement. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face before hardening back into contempt. "Mark told me his parents left this house to both of you," she said, crossing her arms defensively across her designer blouse that probably cost more than the property tax bill in my hand. "He said you're just jealous because he got married and you're still single at 35. I let out a short, humorless laugh. The audacity of my brother never ceased to amaze me. After our parents died, he had fallen apart while I held everything together. The funeral arrangements, the legal paperwork, and the grief that threatened to swallow us both. Our parents had left the house to me because I had helped them pay the mortgage during their financial struggles. Mark had received their investment portfolio and cash savings, which he had quickly spent on his failed business venture. When he came to me 6 months ago, broke and desperate, I couldn't turn him away. Family was family, after all. "I think you need to talk to Mark about this," I said finally, stepping forward. "Because the deed is in my name alone. I've been letting him stay here temporarily while he gets back on his feet." The look of shock on Vanessa's face might have been satisfying under different circumstances, but now it just made me sad. Another person Mark had lied to. "That's not possible," she whispered, her perfectly manicured hand reaching for her phone. "We're renovating the kitchen next week. Mark signed the contracts yesterday." My stomach dropped. Renovations? Without my knowledge or permission? On a house that wasn't his to change? Before I could respond, Vanessa was already dialing Mark's number, her eyes never leaving mine as if I might steal something if she looked away. "Mark, you need to come home right now," she said when he answered. "Your sister is here claiming she owns the house." The way she emphasized claiming made my blood boil. This wasn't a claim, it was a legal fact, documented and filed with the county. While she spoke to my brother, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my files until I found what I was looking for: a digital copy of the deed and my parents' will. I held it up for Vanessa to see, but she turned away deliberately, whispering something into the phone that I couldn't quite catch. The betrayal cut deep. Not just from Mark, who had apparently been lying to his wife, but from Vanessa too, who was treating me like a con artist in my own home. Mark arrived 20 minutes later, during which Vanessa refused to let me pass the entryway. I stood there, growing increasingly furious, as she made small talk on the phone with what sounded like an interior designer about the kitchen renovations. My kitchen, the one my mother had taught me to bake in, the one where my father had sat every morning with his coffee and newspaper. The thought of them tearing it apart without even consulting me felt like a violation. When Mark's car pulled into the driveway, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. My brother had always been charming. It was how he got away with so much, but I wasn't in the mood for his manipulation today. He approached with that familiar smile, the one that had gotten him out of trouble countless times throughout our childhood. "Sarah, I didn't know you were coming by today," he said, as if this was a casual visit and not a confrontation about his lies. He kissed my cheek, and then moved to stand beside Vanessa, his arm sliding around her waist protectively. The united front they presented made me feel like the outsider. Despite standing on the porch of my own home, "I brought the property tax bill," I said, holding up the envelope. "But it seems we have a bigger issue to discuss. Vanessa thinks you own this house." I watched his face carefully, saw the moment when his eyes darkened slightly, not with shame, but with calculation. Mark had always been quick on his feet. "Well, it's a bit complicated," he began, his voice taking on that smooth quality it always did when he was about to spin a tale. "Mom and Dad left it to both of us in spirit, even if the paperwork says otherwise. They would have wanted us to share it." The casual way he rewrote our parents' explicit wishes made my jaw clench. "That's not what their will says, Mark, and you know it," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "They left you their investments and savings. I got the house because I helped them keep it when Dad lost his job." I turned to Vanessa, whose expression had shifted from hostility to uncertainty. "I've been letting Mark stay here temporarily while he gets back on his feet. There was never any agreement about him living here permanently, let alone making renovations." Vanessa's eyes darted between us, clearly trying to determine who was telling the truth. "But we're married now," she said slowly. "We need a place to start our family. Mark said this would be our forever home." The way her voice caught on the word family made me wonder if there was more to their rushed marriage than Mark had told me. "I'm sorry if that's what he told you," I said, genuinely feeling bad for her. "But this house is not his to give. I have the legal documents right here." I held up my phone again, this time directing it toward Mark, whose charming smile had transformed into something harder, more calculating. "Why are you doing this, Sarah?" he asked, his voice taking on that wounded tone he had perfected over the years. "After everything we've been through, you know I need this place. Vanessa and I are trying to start over. Don't you want me to be happy?" It was the same emotional manipulation he had used our entire lives. When we were kids, it was, "Don't you want me to be happy?" when he wanted my toys or my dessert. As adults, it was the same phrase when he needed money or favors, always taking, rarely giving back. "Of course I want you to be happy, Mark," I said, feeling suddenly exhausted. "But not at my expense, not anymore." The tension in the air was palpable as the three of us stood there, a family inheritance standoff on the front porch of our childhood home. I knew this conversation was far from over, and something told me the worst was yet to come. Desenvolvimento do conflito. Parte 02. "You can't just throw us out," Mark said, his voice rising. "Where are we supposed to go? We've already spent money on this place. Our money." The way he emphasized "our" made it clear he was referring to him and Vanessa, conveniently forgetting that I had been covering the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs for the past year. "I never said anything about throwing you out," I replied, finally stepping past Vanessa into the entryway. The familiar scent of home hit me, except it wasn't quite the same. There was an expensive perfume in the air, and I noticed several pieces of furniture I didn't recognize. "But we need to be clear about what's happening here. This is my house, and you're staying here temporarily. Any renovations or major changes need my approval." Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. "So we're supposed to live like guests? Ask permission like children?" Her diamond wedding ring caught the light as she gestured dramatically. "Mark told me this was our marriage home. We've already ordered custom cabinets for the kitchen renovation." I turned to my brother, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "How much have you spent on renovations already?" I asked, dreading the answer. "About $20,000, he admitted, not meeting my eyes. "But it's an investment in the property. It'll increase the value." The betrayal felt like a physical blow. $20,000 on renovations to my house without even mentioning it to me. "Where did you get that kind of money?" I asked, knowing Mark had claimed to be broke just 6 months ago when he begged to move in. "Vanessa's parents gave us a wedding gift," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to another, his tell when he wasn't being entirely truthful. "And I've been doing well with my new consulting business." Vanessa nodded proudly. "Daddy gave us $50,000 to help us start our married life. We thought updating this place would be the perfect use for it." The casual way she mentioned such a large sum made me wonder about the wealth disparity between us. Her designer clothes and expensive perfume suddenly made more sense. "I appreciate that you want to improve the house," I said carefully, "but this isn't just about money. This is my inheritance from our parents. You can't just take over and remake it without even talking to me." I looked around at the changes they'd already made, New artwork on the walls, our family photos removed. Even the color of the living room had been changed from the warm yellow our mother had loved to a stark, modern gray. "It's not like you're using it," Mark countered. "You have your own place downtown. This house has been sitting half empty for a year." "Because I've been letting you live here," I exclaimed, my patience finally snapping. "Out of kindness, because you're my brother and you needed help. Not so, you could move your wife in and pretend it's yours." Vanessa stepped between us, her eyes narrowing. "I think the real issue here is that you're jealous," she said coldly. "Mark told me how you've always resented him, how you manipulated your parents into leaving you the house because you knew it was the most valuable asset." I stared at her, then at Mark, stunned by this complete reversal of the truth. Our parents had left me the house because I had helped them make payments during the recession when Dad was laid off. Mark had been traveling through Europe at the time, not contributing a dime. The inheritance split had been fair. Mark got the liquid assets and I got the property. We had both agreed it was reasonable. "That's not what happened," I said quietly, looking directly at my brother. "And Mark knows it." For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face before he masked it with indignation. "You've always twisted things to make yourself look better," he said, but there was a hollowness to the accusation. I pulled out my phone again, opened my email, and found the message from our parents' lawyer explaining the inheritance distribution. "Read this," I said, handing the phone to Vanessa. "Then decide who's been twisting the truth." As Vanessa read, her expression changed from contempt to confusion. Mark tried to take the phone from her, but she pulled away, continuing to scroll through the detailed explanation of why the assets had been divided as they were, including mentions of my financial contributions to the house over the years. "Mark," she said, her voice suddenly small, "is this true? Did Sarah really help your parents keep this house?" Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. We all froze, looking at each other in confusion. I wasn't expecting anyone, and judging by their faces, neither were Mark and Vanessa. Vanessa recovered first, handing my phone back and moving to answer the door. A moment later, she returned with a middle-aged man carrying a large portfolio case. "Mr. Chen, hi," Mark said, clearly flustered. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "You said to come by with the final kitchen designs whenever they were ready," the man replied cheerfully, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room. "And I finished them this morning. I think you're going to love what we've come up with for your space." "Our space," Vanessa corrected automatically, casting a challenging glance my way. I felt something snap inside me. Enough was enough. "Actually," I said clearly, stepping forward, "this is my house, not theirs. And I haven't approved any kitchen renovations." Mr. Chen looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Mr. Miller hired me to redesign the kitchen. He said he and his wife were the homeowners." "He lied," I said simply. "I'm Sarah Miller. This house belongs to me alone. My brother has been staying here temporarily, but he has no ownership rights whatsoever." The designer looked deeply uncomfortable, clutching his portfolio tighter. "Perhaps I should come back another time," he suggested, already backing toward the door. "That would be best," I agreed, while Mark and Vanessa stood in stunned silence. After Mr. Chen left, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "You had no right to do that," Mark finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I had every right," I countered. "This is my house. You're living here because I allowed it, not because you have any claim to it." Vanessa had gone very still, her eyes fixed on Mark. "Did you lie to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "About owning this house?" Mark's face flushed red. "I didn't lie exactly. I just simplified things. Sarah doesn't need this place. We do. It's not fair that she got the house just because she had money to help our parents when I didn't." The admission hung in the air between us. Vanessa looked stunned, while I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. My brother had always had a loose relationship with the truth, but I never thought he would go this far. "I think I need some air," Vanessa said suddenly, grabbing her purse from the entryway table. "I need to think." Without another word, she walked out the front door, leaving Mark and me alone in the house that had suddenly become the center of our family conflict. As soon as she was gone, Mark's demeanor changed completely. The wounded indignation vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "You've really done it now," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You couldn't just let us have this, could you? Always the responsible one, always following the rules." "This isn't about rules, Mark. It's about honesty, about respect. You lied to your wife, you lied to that designer, and you've been lying to me by pretending this was a temporary arrangement when you clearly intended to take over my house permanently." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know what? You're right. It is about honesty, so let me be honest with you now." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm not leaving this house. Vanessa and I are staying right here, and if you try to force us out, I'll make sure everyone knows what really happened the night Mom and Dad died." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about? You think I don't know you were the last one to see them alive? That you had an argument with Dad about money right before they left for that drive? How convenient that they died and left you the house you'd been helping pay for." The accusation was so outrageous, so vile, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Our parents had died in a terrible accident on a rainy night. A truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel and crossed the median. It was a tragedy, not some conspiracy. "You're sick," I finally managed to say. "How dare you even suggest something like that? You're my brother. We lost our parents together." He shrugged, unmoved by my distress. "It doesn't matter what's true. It only matters what people believe. And people love a scandal, don't they? The dutiful daughter who snapped and caused her parents' accident, then took the house she felt entitled to." In that moment, looking into my brother's eyes, I realized I was dealing with someone who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. The little boy who had cried when our dog died, who had held my hand at our grandma's funeral, he was gone, replaced by this manipulative stranger wearing his face. "Get out," I whispered, my whole body trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "Get out of my house right now." Mark just laughed. "Make me," he challenged, spreading his arms wide. "This is my home now, and if you try to evict us legally, I'll make sure the whole family hears my version of events first." As we stood there in a standoff, the front door opened again. Vanessa walked back in, her face set in a determined expression I hadn't seen before. And behind her, much to my surprise, was a police officer. "This woman is trespassing and threatening us in our home," Vanessa announced to the officer, pointing directly at me. "We want her removed from the premises immediately." The police officer, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and tired eyes, looked between us impassively. "Ma'am, I'll need to see some identification from everyone, please." I felt a surge of disbelief so strong it nearly knocked me off my feet. They were calling the police on me? In my own house? The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Mark's expression had shifted from cold calculation to smug triumph, clearly thinking he had the upper hand now. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I reached for my wallet. "This is actually my house. I own it. My brother has been staying here temporarily, but the property belongs to me alone." "That's not true," Vanessa cut in sharply. "We live here. We've been renovating. Why would we put money into a house that isn't ours?" The officer looked unfazed, as if family property disputes were an everyday occurrence for him. "I'll need to see proof of ownership," he said simply. My heart was pounding as I pulled out my driver's license and handed it to him. "My name is Sarah Miller. The house deed is in my name. I can show you the documentation right now." I reached for my phone again, ready to pull up the digital copies I had saved. Mark stepped forward, his own wallet in hand. "Officer, my sister is having some issues accepting that our parents left the house to both of us. She's been increasingly unstable since their death last year." The concerned look on his face was so convincing that for a moment, I almost believed him myself. "That's a lie," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "The house is solely in my name. Our parents left Mark their investments and savings. I received the house because I helped them keep it during financial difficulties." The officer accepted Mark's ID, comparing our names. "Your siblings, then?" "Yes," Mark confirmed. "Our parents died last year, The inheritance has been contentious. The officer nodded, handing back our IDs. Do either of you have the deed or will available? Or ownership papers for the house? I have digital copies, I said immediately, unlocking my phone and pulling up the documents I had shown Vanessa earlier. I handed my phone to the officer, who studied the screen carefully. I see, he said after a moment, looking up at Mark and Vanessa. According to this, the house is indeed solely in Ms. Sarah Miller's name. Vanessa's face flushed red. That can't be right, Mark told me. I have the original documents at my apartment, I interrupted. If you need to see them. The officer handed my phone back. That won't be necessary right now. Based on what I'm seeing, Ms. Miller is the legal owner of this property. He turned to Mark and Vanessa. If you're staying here, it's with her permission. This isn't a criminal matter, it's civil. If there's a dispute over inheritance, you'll need to take it to court. Mark's smug expression had vanished, replaced by something darker. This is ridiculous. We live here. We've been here for months. As my guests, I emphasized, which I'm now reconsidering. The officer sighed, clearly wanting to be anywhere but in the middle of our family drama. Look, I can't force anyone to leave right now. If Ms. Miller wants you removed from her property, she'll need to go through proper eviction procedures. But I do suggest you all try to work this out civilly. He turned to me. Do you want to file a complaint about being threatened? I glanced at Mark, remembering his vile insinuation about our parents' accident. Part of me wanted to tell the officer everything, but another part held back. Despite everything, he was still my brother. No, I said finally, not at this time. The officer nodded. All right then, I suggest you all take some time to cool off and perhaps consult with attorneys about the property situation. He handed me his card. Call if you need anything else. After the officer left, the three of us stood in silence for a long moment. Vanessa was the first to speak, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. You lied to me, she said to Mark, not even looking in my direction. You told me this was our house, that we could build our life here. Mark reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Vanessa, listen. No, you listen, she snapped. We spent $20,000, money from my parents, on renovations for a house you don't even own. What were you thinking? I was thinking about our future, Mark insisted. Sarah doesn't need this house. She has her apartment downtown. This place is just sitting here, going to waste. I watched their exchange with a strange detachment, suddenly exhausted by the whole situation. This was supposed to be a quick visit to drop off a tax bill, and now I was standing in the middle of what felt like the collapse of my relationship with my only sibling. I'm going to go, I said quietly. We can discuss this when everyone's calmer. I moved toward the door, but Mark stepped in front of me. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and threatening. Don't think for a second that I'm just going to walk away from this house. The menace in his tone sent a chill through me. Move, Mark. Or what? You'll call your police friend back? Tell him how I'm threatening you in your own home? His mockery was evident, but there was something else there too. A desperation that I hadn't noticed before. Why is this house so important to you? I asked suddenly. You never even liked it here when we were growing up. You couldn't wait to leave. A flash of something, panic, crossed his face before he masked it. It's not about the house. It's about what's fair. Mom and Dad always favored you, and this was their final insult. That's not true, and you know it, I replied, frustrated by this revisionist history. They split everything fairly. You got their liquid assets, I got the property. Which you're now using to lord over me, he shot back, letting me stay here like some charity case when half of this should have been mine to begin with. Vanessa had been watching our exchange, her expression shifting from anger to confusion. Wait, she said suddenly. Mark, what happened to the money from your parents' investments? You told me it was just a small amount that you used to start your business. Mark's face paled slightly. It was. The market was down when they died. The investments weren't worth much. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. That's another lie. The portfolio was worth over $300,000, plus about $50,000 in savings. I know because I was there when the lawyer read the will. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. $300,000? And you told me you were struggling when we met? That your business failed because you were undercapitalized? Her voice rose with each question. Where is that money, Mark? The growing look of panic on my brother's face told me everything I needed to know. The money was gone. Somehow, in just a year, he had burned through his entire inheritance, and now he was after my house. It's complicated, he stammered. Investments, business expenses. I was going to tell you, but I wanted to wait until we were more established. Vanessa's face had gone completely white. More established? We're married. We're supposedly buying a house together, a house you don't even own. When exactly were you planning to tell me that you blew through a small fortune? The realization hit me like a physical blow. That's why you've been so desperate to claim this house, isn't it? You lost everything, and you needed something to show for it, something to offer Vanessa. Mark didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. I need to talk to my father, Vanessa said suddenly, grabbing her phone. He needs to know what's happening before we spend any more money on renovations. She walked quickly into the kitchen, already dialing. Left alone with my brother, I studied his face, the face I'd known my entire life, now twisted with a mixture of anger and fear. What happened to the money, Mark? Really? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. Bad investments, some gambling, it got away from me. His voice was hollow, defeated. And you thought taking my house would solve your problems? I thought, he began, then shook his head. I don't know what I thought. That it would buy me time, maybe. That Vanessa's family would help us if they believed we had assets. I felt a mixture of pity and disgust. So you lied to everyone. Me, Vanessa, her family. Did you ever stop to think about the consequences? Of course I did, he snapped, some of his defiance returning. The consequence of telling the truth was losing everything. Vanessa, her family's support, this house. What would you have done? Not lied to everyone I claim to care about, I replied simply. From the kitchen, I could hear Vanessa's voice rising in distress. Whatever conversation she was having with her father wasn't going well. Mark glanced nervously in that direction, then back at me. Sarah, please, he said, his voice suddenly pleading. I need your help. If Vanessa leaves me over this, I don't know what I'll do. It was the same pattern we'd been in our entire lives. Mark creates a problem, then begs for help fixing it. And despite my better judgment, I usually gave in because he was my brother, and I loved him. But this time felt different. The scale of his deception, the willingness to turn Vanessa against me, the horrible insinuation about our parents' death. It had crossed a line I wasn't sure we could come back from. I don't know if I can help you this time, I said quietly. You've gone too far. Before Mark could respond, Vanessa stormed back into the room, her eyes red but her face set with determination. My father wants to speak with you, she said to me, holding out her phone. Now. I hesitated, then took the phone, wondering what fresh complication this would bring to an already impossible situation. Hello, I said cautiously. Ms. Miller. A deep, authoritative voice responded. This is Richard Montgomery, Vanessa's father. I believe we need to have a serious conversation about exactly what's going on with my daughter, your brother, and the house my family has been investing in. Mr. Montgomery, I acknowledged, moving toward the living room window for some semblance of privacy. I understand this is a complicated situation. Complicated? His voice was controlled but edged with anger. My daughter tells me that she and your brother have spent $20,000 renovating a house he doesn't own, while he's apparently lost a substantial inheritance he never disclosed to us. Complicated seems rather inadequate. I watched Mark outside the window, pacing on the front lawn with his hands buried in his hair, a gesture of distress I recognized from childhood. Vanessa stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes never leaving me. I'm as surprised as you are by some of this, I admitted. I knew Mark was staying in my house temporarily, but I had no idea he had told Vanessa he owned it, or that you were funding renovations. And the inheritance? $300,000 plus savings? Did that simply vanish into thin air? I sighed, feeling caught between family loyalty and the truth. I don't know the details of what happened to Mark's portion of the inheritance. That's something you should discuss with him directly. Oh, we will, Mr. Montgomery assured me, his tone suggesting it wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. But right now, I'm concerned about my daughter and the money we've already invested in property improvements. Vanessa tells me you're the sole legal owner? Yes, I confirmed. The house was left to me in my parents' will. Mark received their investment portfolio and savings. There was a pause on the line. I see. And what are your intentions regarding the renovations that have already been started? Or my daughter and your brother's living situation? It was a fair question, but one I wasn't prepared to answer definitively. Honestly, Mr. Montgomery, I only learned about all of this today. I need time to process everything before making any decisions. Understandable, he conceded, his tone softening slightly. But I hope you appreciate that my primary concern is for my daughter's welfare. She married your brother in good faith, believing certain representations he made about his financial situation and their future home. The implication was clear. Mark had not only deceived Vanessa about the house, but had likely presented himself as far more financially stable than he actually was. I wondered how much of their whirlwind romance and hasty marriage had been built on his lies. I do understand, I said. And I'm sorry that Vanessa has been caught in the middle of this. It wasn't my intention to disrupt anyone's life by asserting my ownership rights. No need to apologize for claiming what's legally yours, Mr. Montgomery replied, surprising me with his reasonableness. The responsibility here lies with your brother. However, I would like to propose a meeting. You, Mark, Vanessa, myself, and our respective attorneys, to discuss how to move forward in a way that acknowledges everyone's interests. It was a sensible suggestion, far more measured than I might have expected given the circumstances. I think that's a good idea, I agreed. I'd like to resolve this as fairly as possible. Excellent. My assistant will contact you to arrange the details. He paused, then added, And Ms. Miller, I appreciate your candor. It seems to be in short supply in this situation. After ending the call, I handed the phone back to Vanessa, who had been watching me intently throughout the conversation. What did my father say? She demanded. He wants to arrange a meeting with all of us and our attorneys to figure out how to move forward, I explained, glancing out the window to see Mark still pacing on the lawn. I think it's a reasonable approach. Vanessa's expression remained guarded, but some of the hostility had faded. And until then, are you going to try to throw us out? The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, I hadn't actually considered immediate eviction. Mark was still my brother, and Vanessa, despite her role in this mess, was an innocent party in many ways. No, I said finally. You can stay for now, but we need to be clear about the boundaries. No more renovations without my explicit approval, and I'll need a key since I am the legal owner. She nodded stiffly, then looked away. I need to talk to Mark, she said, moving toward the door. Alone. I watched through the window as she approached my brother on the lawn. Their body language told the story. Her tense posture, his pleading gestures, the distance she maintained between them. Whatever trust had existed in their marriage had been severely damaged, if not broken entirely. Left alone in the house, I wandered from room to room, taking in all the changes they had already made. The family photos that had once lined the hallway were gone, replaced by modern art prints. The dining room had been painted a stark white, erasing the warm terracotta my mother had loved. In the kitchen, I could see the outlines on the walls where cabinets had been removed, the start of the renovation that would have erased one of the last places that still held my parents' presence. Each change felt like a small erasure of my family's history, of the home my parents had created and left to me. Mark hadn't just lied about ownership. He had systematically begun removing all traces of our past, as if by changing the physical space, he could rewrite the story of who owned it. I was still in the kitchen when Mark came back in alone, his face drawn and pale. Where's Vanessa? I asked. She's gone to her parents' house, he replied, his voice hollow. She needs time to think, she says. I nodded, unsurprised. Can you blame her? You lied about everything, Mark. The house, the inheritance, probably your entire financial situation. He slumped into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I know. I messed up. Badly. What happened to the money? Really? I asked, sitting across from him. Despite everything, I wanted to understand. He stared at the kitchen table, tracing a pattern in the wood grain with his finger. It started with the business. I invested heavily, thinking it would take off quickly. When it didn't, I borrowed more, trying to save it. Then I started gambling, thinking I could win enough to cover the losses. He gave a bitter laugh. Classic mistake, right? Chasing losses. The story was so predictable it would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. My brother, always looking for the quick win, the easy path. And then you met Vanessa, I prompted. He nodded. Her family has money, real money. I thought if I could just impress them, show them I had potential, that I wasn't just some failed entrepreneur. But then her father started asking questions about assets, about our plans for the future. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. That's when I started talking about the house. It was the only thing I had left that seemed impressive. Except it wasn't yours to claim, I pointed out. I know that, he snapped, then immediately deflated again. I know, I was desperate, Sarah. Vanessa was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was terrified of losing her. So you built your relationship on lies. How did you think that would end? He didn't answer, just buried his face in his hands. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to come to my room after nightmares, seeking comfort. My anger hadn't disappeared, but it was now mingled with a profound sadness for the mess he had created, for all of us. Her father wants a meeting, I said finally, with lawyers present, to figure out what happens next. Mark looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. So you're not kicking us out immediately? Not immediately, no. But Mark, this can't as it has been. This is my house, and if you stay here, it needs to be with clear boundaries and honest communication. He nodded quickly. Of course, absolutely. I can do that. I wasn't convinced, but I also wasn't ready to sever ties completely. And you need to come clean with Vanessa about everything. No more lies, no more manipulation. If there's any chance of salvaging your marriage, it has to be built on truth going forward. I know, he said quietly. I'm going to try. I really am. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us. Finally, I stood up. I need to go. I've had enough family drama for one day. I held out my hand. I'll need a key. Mark hesitated only briefly before reaching into his pocket and placing a house key in my palm. It was such a small thing, but it felt significant, an acknowledgement, finally, of my rightful ownership. I'll be in touch about the meeting with Mr. Montgomery, I said, moving toward the door. In the meantime, no more renovations. And Mark? I turned to look at him one last time. Don't ever threaten me again with lies about our parents. They deserve better than that, and so do I. He had the decency to look ashamed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I was just desperate. I nodded, accepting the apology without fully believing it. I know. You always are. As I walked to my car, I noticed Vanessa's father's business card had fallen out of my purse onto the passenger seat. Richard Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Development. The logo looked oddly familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen it before. I tucked the card back into my bag, started the engine, and drove away from the house that had become the center of so much conflict. It was only when I was halfway home that the realization hit me. Montgomery Development was the company that had been trying to buy up properties in my parents' neighborhood for the past 2 years, including making several offers on their house before they died. Offers they had firmly rejected, even when they were struggling financially. Suddenly, Mark's desperate need to claim ownership of the house took on a new, more sinister dimension. It wasn't just about impressing Vanessa or having a place to live. There was something much bigger at stake, something involving his new father-in-law's company and plans for the neighborhood. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding as pieces started falling into place. The rushed marriage, the immediate renovations, Richard Montgomery's particular interest in this property. What exactly had my brother gotten himself involved in? And more importantly, what had he promised to people who now believed they had a claim on my house? The revelation about Montgomery Development changed everything. Instead of driving home, I turned around and headed toward my office downtown. As a real estate attorney, I had access to resources that could help me understand exactly what was happening in my parents' neighborhood. 2 hours later, I sat staring at my computer screen, surrounded by property records, zoning applications, and development permits. The picture they painted was clear and deeply troubling. Montgomery Development had been systematically acquiring properties in a 6-block radius around my parents' house for the past 3 years. Property after property had been sold, often following a similar pattern: a sudden change in ownership followed by renovations, then a quick sale to one of Montgomery's subsidiary companies. They were assembling land for a major development project, a luxury condominium complex with high-end retail space. The plans had already been filed with the city planning department. The only properties they hadn't secured were my parents' house and 2 others on the same street. My hands shook as I pulled up my email and searched for correspondence from the past year. There it was, 3 separate offers for the house after my parents died, each from different companies that, I now realized, were all connected to Montgomery Development. I had rejected them all, not wanting to part with my inheritance so quickly after losing my parents. Had Mark known about this when he married Vanessa? Had he deliberately sought out the developer's daughter as part of some scheme to gain control of the house? The thought was almost too painful to consider, but given everything that had happened, I couldn't dismiss it. I picked up my phone and called the one person who might have insight into the neighborhood's history with Montgomery Development, Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor who had lived on the street for over 40 years. "Sarah, dear, how lovely to hear from you," Mrs. Chen answered, her voice warm with genuine affection. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Mrs. Chen," I replied, smiling despite everything. Mrs. Chen had been like a second mother to me growing up, always ready with homemade cookies and life advice. "I actually called to ask you about something. Have you been approached by Montgomery Development about selling your house?" There was a pause on the line. "Yes, several times," she finally said, her voice dropping. "They're quite persistent. How did you know?" "I've been doing some research. They seem to be buying up the whole neighborhood." "That's right. The Petersons sold last month and the Goldsteins before that. They're offering good money, but—" She trailed off. "But what, Mrs. Chen?" "The tactics aren't always ethical," she said carefully. "Some neighbors have reported strange incidents after refusing to sell. Vandalism, unexpected building code violations, problems with utilities. Nothing that can be directly traced back to the company, of course, but the pattern is clear." A chill ran down my spine. "Has anything like that happened to you?" "Small things," she admitted. "My mail goes missing sometimes. Last month, someone reported a dangerous condition on my property that required an expensive inspection. The inspector found nothing, of course." The implications were disturbing. If Montgomery Development was willing to harass elderly homeowners to pressure them into selling, what other lines might they cross? "Mrs. Chen, this might sound strange, but has anyone from Montgomery ever mentioned my brother Mark, or a woman named Vanessa?" "Vanessa?" Mrs. Chen sounded surprised. "As in Vanessa Montgomery? Richard Montgomery's daughter?" My heart sank. "You know her?" "Not personally, but everyone in the neighborhood knows about the Montgomerys. Richard's daughter was in the local paper when she got engaged. I remember because your brother brought over the article to show me. He seemed quite proud." The timeline suddenly became clear. Mark had known exactly who Vanessa was before they met. This wasn't a coincidence. It was calculated. "Mrs. Chen, when did Mark show you that article?" I asked, my voice tight. "Oh, let me think. It must have been around January, just a few weeks after he moved into your parents' house. 3 months before he announced their whirlwind romance. 6 months before their hasty wedding. My brother had targeted Vanessa Montgomery deliberately as part of some scheme involving my house and her father's development plans." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You've been incredibly helpful," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the betrayal cutting through me. "And please, be careful. If anything else happens with your property, call me immediately." After hanging up, I sat in my office as the sun set, casting long shadows across the desk covered in evidence of my brother's elaborate deception. The Mark I thought I knew, the brother I'd grown up with, fought with, loved despite his flaws, seemed to be disappearing before my eyes. replaced by a stranger capable of much darker manipulations than I'd ever imagined. I gathered the most important documents, including the property records showing Montgomery's acquisitions and the development plans that included the space where my house stood, and drove home to my apartment. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night reviewing everything, making notes, preparing for whatever confrontation was coming. The next morning, Richard Montgomery's assistant called to arrange our meeting for the following day. I agreed to the time and location, Montgomery Development's downtown offices, but insisted on bringing not only my real estate attorney, but also a trusted colleague who specialized in development law. Something told me I would need all the expertise I could get. When I arrived at Montgomery Development's gleaming high-rise office the next day, I was ushered immediately into a large conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My attorneys, Jacob and Priya, followed close behind, both briefed on the situation and the evidence I'd uncovered. Richard Montgomery stood as we entered, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Ms. Miller," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. Vanessa sat beside him, her expression guarded. There was no sign of Mark yet. "This is my attorney, Jacob Stern," I introduced, "and Priya Patel, who specializes in development and zoning law." Montgomery's eyebrow raised slightly at Priya's introduction, but he maintained his composure. "A pleasure. My legal team." He gestured to two sharp-looking attorneys seated to his left. "And of course, you know my daughter, Vanessa." I nodded in Vanessa's direction, noting how she barely met my eyes. She looked tired, the polished appearance from our previous encounter somewhat diminished. "I understand your brother will be joining us?" Montgomery inquired, glancing at his watch. "That was my understanding as well," I replied, taking a seat across from them. "Though I haven't spoken to him since yesterday." As if on cue, the conference room door opened and Mark walked in. He looked terrible. Unshaven, hair uncombed, wearing the same clothes from the day before. His eyes darted between me and the Montgomerys, and I could see the moment he registered the presence of my two attorneys. Something like panic flashed across his face before he composed himself. "Sorry I'm late," he mumbled, taking the remaining seat at the far end of the table, creating a physical distance that seemed symbolic of his position in this conflict. "Now that we're all here," Montgomery began, folding his hands on the table, "I think it's best to address the situation directly. Ms. Miller, you own the property at 1452 Maple Street, which my daughter and your brother have been living in and renovating. They did so under the mistaken belief that your brother had an ownership interest in the property. We'd like to discuss a resolution that acknowledges everyone's interests." His framing was careful, diplomatic, avoiding any direct mention of Mark's deception. I noticed he referred to their mistaken belief, rather than acknowledging the lies that had led to this situation. "Before we discuss resolutions," I said, opening the folder I'd brought, "I think we need clarity about what's actually happening here." I pulled out the development plans I'd discovered and slid them across the table. "Montgomery Development has been systematically acquiring properties around my house for the past 3 years. You filed plans for a major development project that includes the space where my house currently stands. So this isn't just about my brother and your daughter's living situation, is it, Mr. Montgomery?" The room went silent. Montgomery's practiced smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "You've done your homework, Ms. Miller. Yes, we have a development project planned for that area. It's going to revitalize an aging neighborhood and bring significant economic benefits to the community. And you need my house to complete it," I stated flatly. "Your property would certainly enhance the project's cohesiveness," he acknowledged. I turned to Mark, who was studying the table intensely, avoiding everyone's eyes. "And you knew about this when you pursued Vanessa, didn't you?" Mark's head snapped up. "What? No, that's not—" "Please don't lie anymore." I cut him off. "I spoke to Mrs. Chen. You showed her Vanessa's engagement announcement in the paper weeks before you allegedly met her. This wasn't coincidence. You targeted the daughter of the developer who wanted our parents' house." Vanessa gasped, her eyes widening as she turned to Mark. "Is that true?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Mark looked trapped, his gaze darting between Vanessa and her father. It wasn't like that, he insisted. I mean, yes, I knew who you were, but I didn't plan to fall in love with you. But you planned to meet her, I pressed. To get close to her, to use her connection to her father to gain control of my house. The color drained from Vanessa's face as Mark's silence confirmed my accusation. She turned to her father. Did you know about this? Montgomery's expression remained carefully neutral. I knew your relationship progressed unusually quickly, and I was certainly aware of the potential synergy regarding the property, but I assumed it was a fortuitous coincidence. Fortuitous, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my brother conspired to marry your daughter as part of a scheme to gain control of my property, possibly with your knowledge or encouragement. Montgomery's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Miller. Yes, it is, I agreed. Almost as serious as the pattern of harassment that homeowners in my neighborhood have experienced after refusing to sell to your company. Strange building code violations, missing mail, vandalism, all coincidences, I'm sure. I resent the implication, Montgomery said, his voice hardening. Montgomery Development operates with the highest ethical standards. My attorney, Jacob, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand, the ownership of the property and the unauthorized renovations. Yes, Montgomery agreed quickly, clearly eager to shift away from my allegations. As I see it, there are several potential paths forward. We could discuss a fair market purchase of the property, or perhaps a joint venture arrangement where you maintain ownership but benefit from our development expertise. Or, Priya interjected, Ms. Miller could simply assert her legal rights as the sole owner and require your daughter and Mr. Miller to vacate the premises, bringing any claims for the unauthorized renovations against Mr. Miller personally. Mark paled at this suggestion, while Montgomery's expression darkened. That seems unnecessarily adversarial, he said smoothly, especially given the family connections involved. Family connections that were manufactured as part of a scheme to acquire my property, I pointed out, which brings me to my proposal. I pulled out another document from my folder. This is a cease and desist letter regarding any further harassment of homeowners in the neighborhood surrounding my property. It includes specific references to incidents reported by multiple residents, including Mrs. Chen. My colleagues at Harrison and Schmidt, one of the city's top litigation firms, are prepared to pursue this matter aggressively if necessary. Montgomery's facade of pleasant negotiation cracked slightly. This is completely unnecessary. As I said, Montgomery Development operates ethically. Then you should have no problem agreeing to stop all pressure tactics against homeowners who don't wish to sell, I interrupted. Additionally, I want full disclosure of any agreements, formal or informal, between your company and my brother regarding my property. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah, this is getting out of hand. Is it? I turned to him, my patience finally exhausted. Because from where I'm sitting, you conspired with Montgomery Development to gain control of my house through deception and manipulation. You married Vanessa as part of that scheme. You lied to everyone involved, me, Vanessa, her family. So please, tell me how this is getting out of hand. The room fell silent again. Vanessa looked between her father and my brother, her expression a mixture of hurt and dawning comprehension. Dad? She finally said, did you encourage Mark to pursue me because of the house? Montgomery hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, I saw the truth. He hadn't explicitly directed Mark to pursue his daughter, but he had recognized the opportunity when it presented itself and had done nothing to discourage it, may even have subtly facilitated it. Of course not, sweetheart, he finally said, but the response came too late, too rehearsed. Vanessa stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I need some air, she announced, her voice shaking. She walked quickly to the door, pausing only briefly to look back at Mark. Don't follow me, I mean it. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Montgomery's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. This is a disaster, he muttered, running a hand over his face. He looked at Mark with undisguised contempt. You assured me you had a legitimate claim to that property. I thought I could convince Sarah to sign it over, Mark admitted, his voice small. Or at least include me on the deed. I didn't think she'd find out about the development plans so quickly. Enough, I said, standing up. Here's what's going to happen. My brother and Vanessa will vacate my house within 30 days. Montgomery Development will cease all harassment of homeowners in the neighborhood immediately. And if I hear of any further attempts to pressure Mrs. Chen or anyone else, I will not hesitate to take legal action and bring this matter to the attention of the press. Montgomery stared at me for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded curtly. We have other development opportunities. This isn't worth the potential complications. I turned to Mark, who looked utterly defeated. As for you, we'll discuss arrangements for the removal of your belongings from my house. And then... I paused, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us. And then I think we need some time apart. Mark nodded, not meeting my eyes. I understand, he said quietly. As my attorneys and I gathered our materials to leave, Montgomery stopped me with a question. Your parents refused to sell to us, even when they were struggling financially. Why? I looked at him, surprised by the genuine curiosity in his voice. Because to them, it wasn't just a house or an asset. It was our home. It held our history, our memories. Some things are worth more than money, Mr. Montgomery. He nodded slowly, a flicker of something like respect crossing his face. You're very much like them, Ms. Miller. Thank you, I said, meaning it. That's the highest compliment you could give me. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my parents' house, my house, watching as the last of the renovations neared completion. After Mark and Vanessa moved out, I decided to keep the house rather than sell it, despite several attractive offers from developers unrelated to Montgomery. Instead, I'd moved in myself, turning my downtown apartment over to a friend who needed a fresh start. The house needed work. Some of the renovations Mark and Vanessa had started were half-finished and poorly planned, but I'd taken my time, preserving what mattered most while carefully updating the rest. My mother's beloved kitchen remained largely intact, though with new appliances and countertops. My father's study, which Mark had begun converting into a home gym, was restored to its original purpose, his old desk refinished and positioned by the window where he used to read. Mrs. Chen came by often, bringing homemade dumplings and stories about the neighborhood's history. She had experienced no further coincidental problems with her property since my confrontation with Montgomery. Neither had any of the other holdout homeowners. Whatever plans Montgomery Development had for the area seemed to be officially abandoned, at least for now. I heard about Mark and Vanessa through mutual acquaintances. Their marriage had ended, unsurprisingly. The foundation of lies was too extensive to overcome, especially once Vanessa understood the full extent of Mark's deception. She had filed for divorce and moved back to her family's home in another state, seemingly determined to distance herself from both her father's business practices and the husband who had targeted her as part of a property scheme. Mark himself had left town shortly after moving out of my house. He sent an email saying he needed a fresh start somewhere, without the weight of his mistakes following him. Part of me was relieved. The betrayal still felt too raw for reconciliation, but another part missed the brother I thought I had. I wondered if that person had ever really existed, or if he had always been capable of such calculated deception. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, surprised to find Richard Montgomery standing on my porch. Mr. Montgomery, I said, unable to hide my surprise. This is unexpected. He looked different somehow, less imposing than he had in his corporate office, more human. I apologize for dropping by unannounced, Ms. Miller. I was in the neighborhood and thought I might check in. I hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. Would you like to come in? He entered, looking around with undisguised curiosity. You've done beautiful work with the renovations, he commented, respectful of the home's character. Thank you, I replied, leading him to the living room. That was important to me. I gestured for him to sit. Can I offer you something to drink? No, thank you. I won't stay long. He settled into an armchair, looking slightly uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize personally for my role in what happened. While I didn't explicitly direct your brother's actions, I recognized the potential advantage in their relationship and did nothing to discourage it. That was wrong. His candor surprised me. I appreciate your honesty. Vanessa and I have had many difficult conversations since then. about our family values, about the way we conduct business. She's quite disappointed in me. There was genuine regret in his voice. She's made it clear that she wants no part of the family business if we operating as we have been. And will you? As before? He shook his head slowly. No. We're implementing new policies, more transparent approaches to property acquisition. No more pressure tactics, no more hiding behind shell companies. He gave a rueful smile. My daughter can be quite persuasive when she believes in something. She sounds like someone I might have been friends with under different circumstances, I observed. Perhaps you still could be, he suggested. She asks about you sometimes, you know. I think she admires how you stood your ground. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. The idea of friendship with Vanessa seemed complicated, given everything that had happened, but not impossible. Maybe someday, I allowed. Montgomery nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is the other reason for my visit, he said, holding it out to me. It's a letter from your brother. I stared at the envelope, making no move to take it. How did you get this? He contacted me about a month ago, asked if I would deliver it personally when the time seemed right. Said you might be more likely to read it if it didn't come directly from him. Reluctantly, I accepted the envelope. Have you spoken with him recently? How is he? He seems humbled, Montgomery said carefully. Working construction in Colorado from what I gather. Manual labor, honest work. He stood, apparently sensing my need for privacy. I should go. Thank you for seeing me. I walked him to the door, the unopened letter heavy in my hand. At the threshold, he paused. Your parents would be proud of you, Miss Miller. Not many people would have stood up to someone like me, or had the resources and knowledge to do it effectively. I had good teachers, I said simply. After Montgomery left, I sat on the porch swing my father had built, turning the letter over in my hand several times before finally opening it. Sarah, I've written this letter a dozen times, and it never comes out right. How do you apologize for the kind of betrayal I'm guilty of? Words seem inadequate, but they're all I have. What I did was unforgivable. I lied to you, to Vanessa, to everyone. I manipulated and schemed and hurt the people I claimed to care about most. There's no excuse for it, though I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why I did what I did. The need to impress, to win, to have what others have, it's been a pattern my whole life, but never to this extent. I want you to know that my feelings for Vanessa became real, even if they started as part of a plan. That doesn't excuse anything, but it's true. I did love her, which makes it even more tragic that I destroyed any chance at happiness with her through my own deception. I'm trying to rebuild myself from the ground up. Honest work, therapy, making amends where I can. I don't expect forgiveness, I'm not sure I deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the full extent of what I did wrong. The house is yours, as it always was. Our parents were right to leave it to you. You were always the responsible one, the one who helped when they needed it, while I was off chasing the next thrill. I see that clearly now. If there ever comes a day when you might be willing to speak to me again, I would be grateful for the chance. But I understand if that day never comes. With love and profound regret, Mark folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope, my emotions too tangled to sort through. Forgiveness seemed premature, but the door wasn't entirely closed. Not yet. Inside, I went to the mantel where I'd arranged a collection of family photos. Mom and Dad on their wedding day, Mark and me as children building sandcastles at the beach, all four of us at my law school graduation. Despite everything, these memories were real. The love had been real, even if it had become twisted and damaged along the way. The house around me stood solid and unchanged in its essentials, despite all the attempts to claim it, change it, or erase its history. Like the inheritance it represented, it had weathered the storm of betrayal and emerged still standing, altered in some ways, but fundamentally itself. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Dinner at 6? Bringing fresh dumplings and that nice young lawyer from your firm you mentioned. I smiled and texted back a quick, yes, thank you, before turning to finish the kitchen cleaning. Life was moving forward. New connections were forming. Old wounds were beginning to heal, however slowly. Outside, spring flowers were pushing up through the soil in the garden my mother had loved. The same garden I had replanted last month, preserving her favorite perennials while adding a few new varieties of my own. It seemed an apt metaphor for what was happening in my life, honoring what came before while making room for new growth. The house, my house, would remain a home, not a development opportunity or a pawn in someone else's game. And I would remain its guardian, protecting not just the physical structure but the legacy and love it represented. Some inheritances, after all, are about much more than property.